Hi, welcome back to another video.
You know, inspiration can come from anywhere. And for today's project, that inspiration came when I found this. And I'm pretty sure it's a bracelet, but when I first saw it, I thought, that's the biggest ring I've ever seen. And then I started to think, imagine the finger that this ring would have fit on. And that reminded me of a story that I heard once about a guy who saw an actual mummified finger of a giant. And this story takes place in Egypt in the 80s. And I'll put a link down below so that you can read the whole story. But it is known as the Bir Hooker finger. And these are some pictures of, supposedly, of the actual finger. Now, I don't know if any of that's real or not, but that finger does seem to be just about the right size for this ring. So let's make a reproduction of the Bir Hooker finger and put the ring on it. So it turns out that this ring fits perfectly on a pool noodle. So we're going to use a pool noodle as the base for our finger. I cut some lengths of 1/2-inch PVC pipe. It turns out that this pipe fits right in the middle of the hole of the pool noodle. This PVC is actually the kind that you put electric cords, cables through, but regular white PVC works as well. So I want to build the bone structure first. So I got some reference on the internet of what finger bones look like. And I'm going to cut 3 sections here. I've already got my 3 PVCs. And we'll get the pool noodle to go with it. And now I'm going to sculpt these into finger bone shapes. I found that the Dremel tool is the quickest way and the way that gave me the most control. So I'm just going to gradually carve these down and keep referring to my photos until I have some cool bone shapes. Now the only bone that we're actually going to see is a piece of the PVC pipe that's poking out, so I took it over to my bandsaw and carefully cut some cracks in it. So here are the 3 pieces kind of roughly put in position. And at this point I thought, oh no, I've ruined this because the ring is supposed to fit right around the tube, but I carved down the pool noodle quite a bit, so now the ring is way too big. And even though I'm going to cover this with dried skin, I don't think I'm going to be putting enough to fill in the gap. That's what I thought, and I'll show you how I fixed that, and then you'll see by the end that I probably should have just stuck with this one, and it probably would have been perfect, but it ended up working out anyway. So to fix that problem, I cut a new piece of pool noodle for the first joint, and then I cut a smaller piece and wrapped it around the very end to make it bigger. That way the bone could it needs to be more bulbous there at the joint. Once the glue was dry on the end piece, then I just carved it once again to be shaped roughly like a bone. Now we're going to completely cover all of this with skin, so it doesn't need to be perfect, but it's nice to get like the indents and the overall shape so that when the skin goes on, it makes anatomical sense. With everything carved, now I just used hot glue to glue them into place. And then just a little bit of dremeling, last minute dremeling before we put the skin on. Now for the skin, we're going to do a process that is basically paper mache, but you'll see that I also kind of make some clay out of it so that I can sculpt specific shapes. So I've got white glue here, just regular PVA glue, and I'm just adding some water to make that all, well, this is really old glue. I'm going to get some better glue here in a minute. But you stir it around until it's completely dissolved. It'll just turn into a white liquid. And now I'm just going to paint this on the surface first. This will give our skin something to stick to. For the skin, we're going to use toilet paper. And it sticks right onto it. It is very messy, so use gloves. I'm also going to use a chip brush, and I'm painting over top of the toilet paper. Now you can see here that the wet toilet paper makes a really cool texture. We're going to use this to our advantage. It's going to look like old wrinkly skin. And we're going to ultimately do several layers of this. So first we're going to cover the whole thing with toilet paper and then let it dry. The next day we're going to add ligaments, and we're going to do this by taking our toilet paper and kind of twisting it. Then we'll get it wet, and we're able to like lay it down in the same place that real ligaments would go. So the first coat is dry and it's kind of hard. If you've ever done paper mache, you know what that feels like. So again, we're going to cover this with the glue water, and then I'm going to cover, once all of the tendons are the ligaments are in place, then I'm going to cover it all with a whole nother layer of toilet paper. Now we're never going to actually see the ligaments, but we will see the dents that it puts in the surface. And so it's just going to add a little bit more realism to the end product. In case you're curious, this is how I set it up to dry. I just set it over this peg and let it dry overnight. We've got a good base for it now, but I'm not pleased with some of the surface and some of the shapes. So now I'm going to really sculpt some more. So I'm going to take a wad of toilet paper and I'm just going to dip it in the glue, get it soaking wet. And then it actually acts like clay at this point. So I can use it to fill in big areas. I can also, here I'm using a stick to kind of define some dents in there, some wrinkles for the knuckles. And we need to do the nail bed. But in order to do that, I need a fingernail. So I got this old plastic container, and just with scissors, I'm going to cut out a fingernail. I wanted this because it's already a little bit curved. And I've sketched where the nail will go. So now it's back to making the toilet paper clay and putting it on the tip of the finger where the nail bed is. And I'm going to lay this out and then use the plastic fingernail to actually make a groove in there for me to slide it in later. Okay, this is fully dry, and with this toilet paper skin, this really probably is good enough to start painting right now if you want mummified finger. I kind of want it to be a little bit grosser, so we're going to make it feel a little bit more fleshy. And to do that, we're going to use latex. So I'll put the liquid latex and I'll mix in some acrylic craft paint of the base color that I want and a little bit of water. And we're putting one last coating of toilet paper. Now with this, I'm just putting a single layer on here, and you'll see it wrinkles up really nicely. I'm trying to get the final kind of wrinkly look on this, so this will be the actual skin of it. We got a lot of that as we were doing it, but I'm doing it very intentionally here, letting it wrinkle up. Okay, we've let that dry for several hours, and now it's time to actually get to really painting it. Now when you paint on top of latex, it's important that you always have latex in your paint. So I'm going to be doing the exact same kind of thing. Liquid latex mixed with water, mixed with paint. And if you've ever watched any of my videos before, you know that I like to do washes. And so I'm just going to dab this darker paint on, let it sit for a little bit, and then just kind of dab it off. And I'm going to do this several times with different colors, letting it dry each time. One thing to keep in mind is that because when you have latex mixed with your paint, the paint will actually dry darker than what it is when it's wet. So just keep that in mind. Sorry for the whiplash here, but I'm going to jump over to the fingernail because I need to get the fingernail on in order to finish it. So I've got my piece of plastic that I had cut out. I'm just going to paint the underside of it with my fingernail color. I then glued it into place with hot glue, and this turned out to be not the best thing. In the end, I end up using E6000 to hold it in place. But the fingernail's too long, so I'm going to trim it with some scissors. And I want some gross wear and tear on it, so I'm going to use a utility knife and just gently put some scratches across the surface, and I'll cut some notches in the tip so like it's a broken fingernail. I did a very similar process when I made the zombie hands, if you look at my zombie video. Okay, whiplash again. So as I was working on this, I realized that this little piece of PVC that's going to be poking out, that's supposed to be the bone, is way too skinny. So I decided to cut a piece of 1-inch PVC that I'm going to put right over the top. I'm able to push it down into the pool noodle, and then I'll glue it in place with E6000. Now, the bones are not actually cylindrical like this pipe, so to add a little bit of more interest to it, I make some of my white glue and water and toilet paper clay, and I sculpt it on around the pipe in an interesting shape. I'm going to let this dry, and once it's dry, I can just sand it. And I can use regular sandpaper. I used a Dremel tool, and now we've got a nice, interesting shape. All right, let's paint all of the final details now. Okay, again, I'm back with my latex and paint and water mixture, and I'm painting this very dark stuff just in very specific areas to enhance the deepness, the deep areas or the sunken areas. So I'm doing it around the tendons, around the nail bed. And then I paint the fingernail with some yellow paint. This doesn't have very much water mixed with it at all. I just paint it with the yellow, and then I immediately wipe it off with a paper towel. And it leaves kind of a yellowish stain. I'm going to do the same thing with a little bit of green, a little bit of brown. Now for the bone, we don't want to see inside, so I cut a little bit of pool noodle that I could shove inside, and the cool, holy texture looks kind of like the inside of a bone. And so we'll glue that in place, and I'm going to paint all of the bone with an off-white base coat. And then again for the bone, washes of burnt umber with a little bit of yellow ochre, a little bit of green, and a little bit of black, but it's all very watered down. Lots of different layers, lots of different passes. Okay, we're back to where we started from. This giant ring is too shiny and new to look like it's part of a old mummified finger. So we're going to make it look older, and to do that, I'm just going to use some black acrylic paint. And then I wipe it off. Now, I don't want to wipe it off completely. I do want to leave some paint there, so I just kind of get the majority of it off. I'm going to cover this whole thing, both sides, including the stone, with black paint, and then wipe it off. And you'll see, it just makes it look old and patinaed. After putting the ring on, I'm just adding a little bit of darkness around it, as if it's just a little bit of shadow or some wear. Or maybe even some of the oxidation from the metal has gotten onto the finger. So I'm painting it on, wiping it off, same thing you've seen me do through the whole process. And with that, we're done. Let's take a look at the final product. This was a really fun project, and it's really cool to finally have my own Bir Hooker replica. And it's kind of cool have it laying around and just think, whoa, what if there really were giants and they were this big? Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, please give me a thumbs up. Give me some hype down below. Subscribe if you want to see more videos like this. Tell a friend. Anyway, I appreciate you being here. I appreciate you watching my videos. And until next time, don't be bored. Be creative.